That was a new song for me. That was a new song for you. That's awesome. We're going to sing that again at the end of the message. Years ago, when I was in Sunday school, we learned this song, This Little Light of Mine. You want to help me with this? This Little Light, anybody know this song? I mean, we just sang a song that's brand new. Now, if you didn't have Sunday school, you don't know this song, but if you do, this is now going to be stuck in your head for about 3 years, okay? Ready? Let's try to sing this. How's this go? Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Amen. Now that's going to be burned into our heads for at least a few hours, which is good. You know, as a child, I grew up singing that song, and we had different renditions. I like what Rob did to it, because when I sang, we didn't clap in church. Now we can clap in church, which I'm grateful for. But it was a song that encouraged us to be the light, right? And especially in a season that we're going through right now, we are called to be the light. And we're called to kind of take what God has given and say, this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine, and let it shine. You with me, church? This morning I came down and came downstairs and went to our kitchen. And this candle that we had lit last night was still on, lit. What's the right word? You don't have a switch, but it's still on fire. There we go. Okay, that's really awkward. But anyway, it was a new candle, or newer candle, and didn't have much wax taken off of it last night. And so when I woke up, I thought, and I'm not a candle kind of a person, but I'm married to a candle person. And but I thought, it's not like my wife's going to run out of candles, don't get me wrong, but I was concerned that the candle would have been burnt down to almost nothing being lit overnight, right? And it smells kind of okay. It's sugar cookies, but it's not great sugar cookie smelling, but it smells nice enough up here. But I looked at it, and I was shocked that the wax had hardly been melted off in the course of, I'll just say, 12 hours. Because I was sitting there last night around 8 o'clock, and this morning, it was 5:30 when I got up and changed the time or whatever, but it's been, I carried it from my house here and kept it going so that you could see it. It's fascinating because I started to think, what keeps this going for so long? So I did exactly as any reasonable person today would do. I wanted to become an expert on how to make candles. So I Googled it and read a couple articles, and now I am an expert on that. Right? That's how it works. If you want to be an expert on being a doctor, Google it. You know that WebMD, and you're good. Now you can instruct your doctor on how to do things. You know, church, pastor, it's all the same. Just Google it. Now I know how to make a wax candle and everything, so I'm good. So after becoming an expert, I just figured I'd share with you some of that wonderful knowledge that I have with you. You need a wick. Okay, I know. You're impressed with my knowledge so far. But the wick can be made of a lot of different things. It could be made of rope or string, wood, and even spaghetti. Interesting. And then the stuff around it is wax that, I'm not going to go into all that, but it's wax, or it could be oil in a container, even vegetable oil. I didn't make all of these yet. There's only highlights of an article, so if I'm off a little bit, I'm working on that PhD in wax making, but we'll get there. But the wax is actually, and this is what kind of got me going, because if I light a little match or light a piece of rope, it's going to burn up pretty quickly. But it made me kind of fascinated to look at it and say, why is it still going and the wax is hardly burnt down? And so I'm doing a little bit of research, and you might know this. You probably read those articles before I did, but that's okay. The wax is actually the fuel that keeps it going. It's burning the fuel off. And depending on what type of wax you use, evidently they used a good wax. If you go to Walmart or Dollar Store, that's probably be gone in about 2 hours. But this is a better kind of a wax, I guess, and it lasts much longer because the fuel, the way they design it, the fuel keeps on going and going and going. If I can relate this to where we are today, in 2021, I would say that many people feel nope, this is a new candle. They don't feel like a new candle. They feel like this candle. The wick's kind of burnt. The wax is cold. And you feel like you should just be on a shelf. I don't know if that's how you feel. But can I ask for your engagement? How many of you know someone, maybe it's yourself, but you don't have to admit that. How many of you know someone that you would say feels like this right now? Raise your hand. How many of you know someone like that you say they feel like this right now? That's almost everyone. And I would tend to think that in this room, there are several people that feel like this candle. That they were this candle. That when they walked into a room, they lit the room up. They were excited to be there. They warmed the place. Just having it present, having your presence there was a good thing. But many are here now. What do you do with that? I went to a conference yesterday up in New York. It was a church ministry, church leadership conference, and I went up there. And one of the speakers was describing this, and this is a conference that's at the end of a pandemic. And one of the speakers was describing this, David Whiting, as he was talking. And he said, when the pandemic started, and he talked about it as a pastor, and this is my life, so I'm just going to bring you into my life for a moment, and then you can go back to, seeing where it's at for you. But for my life, we would say as pastors, there's no way we're shutting church down. If you were to say a month before that we were going to be locking the doors, no one's allowed into being in the church building for a week, maybe I would buy that. A month, I'd be like, there's no way. I would be going nuts. It's 6 months. We did not meet in this auditorium for, it was about 8 months. Now, for pastors, most of us would say this, over my dead body. You know that because when it snows and it's like 2 feet high, you're calling me, are we going to cancel church? And I'm like, I don't want to. And you're like, but we should. It's safer. That's just how we're wired. And if anyone would have said we'd be shut down for 8 months, I would have said no way. And go online, try to preach to an empty auditorium for several months. It's weird. And we went into this, and here's how it started, right? 2 weeks. Remember? This is going to be 2 weeks, and we'll get rid of this thing before it takes over. 2 weeks turned into 2 months. We're going to flatten the curve. And then we had all kinds of, at the same time, we began to have all kinds of, we went from heroes to villains. We had all kinds of tension, racial tension, and all kinds of things that happened at the same time. It was a part of our life. And as a pastor, I said, if we could do this, we'll get over the season and get back to normal. And then if we could get over this, we'll get back to normal. And then it was, if we could get over this election year, we'll get back to normal. And then it was, if we could just get past the vaccination. I think this pandemic is going to be a 5-year pandemic. Right? And honestly, and I've been vulnerable with you from day one, this has to be the hardest season of ministry for me in my entire life. I've been here since 1998, and it's hard. How do you keep this going when you feel like this? Listen, that's just my life, because you come to church, and you're here for an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours a week, and you appreciate being here, and I appreciate you being here, but you go to work tomorrow. You go home this afternoon. So your life is different than mine, and you're not thinking about church all week like I am, 24/7. That's where I'm at. So that's not affecting you. That's not your candle that's cold and on a shelf. I'm just saying there's my life. So my question that I want to chase this morning in your life or in someone you know is, what do you do to go from here to here, or to make sure you don't go from here to here? That's what we're going to chase. In Revelation chapter 10 is where we're going to pick this up. Probably the oddest text we would look at for this, but chapter 10 and chapter 11 are tremendous in relation to this. Revelation chapter 10 and chapter 11. I'm just going to read and explain the chapters as they're presented to us, and then I'm going to come back and give 4 application points to what we're reading. So chapter 10, verse 1. It says, "Then I saw another mighty angel coming down from heaven, wrapped in a cloud, with a rainbow over his head, and his face was like the sun, the legs like pillars of fire." Picture this in your mind, if you will. Do this on a coloring book, okay? How would you do this? It's a mighty, huge angel coming down from heaven, wrapped in a cloud. So he's got a cloud all around him. Looks like that. What's the guy the puffy guy that does the tire thing? Yeah, Michelin Man. Okay, good. Rainbow over his head. Well, that's interesting. And his face like the sun, so it's very bright, and legs like pillars of fire. So, this had to be really cool to look at. And then verse 2, he had a little scroll open in his hand, and he set his right foot, notice his right foot, how big is his foot? On the sea. So his right foot on the sea, out in the ocean somewhere, and his left foot on the land. Kind of a mighty angel. And called out with a loud voice like a lion roaring. When he called out, the 7 thunders sounded. When the 7 thunders had sounded, I was about to write. So remember, we have we have all these 7s going on here in Revelation. You have the 7 bowls, you have 7 trumpets, and we see the 7 thunders, and so there's all these 7s going on. But he says, don't write it down. What you see with the 7 thunders, don't write this down. So it's as if we're missing a whole section of what's going on by the providence and plan of God. He says in verse 5, the angel whom I saw standing on the sea, the land, raised his right hand to heaven and swore by him who lives forever and ever, who created heaven, what is in it, the earth and what is in it, the sea and what is in it, that there would be no more delay, but that in the days of the trumpet call to be sounded by the 7th angel, the mystery of God would be fulfilled, just as he announced to his servants, the prophets. Now it's interesting, the songs that were both sang this morning, I don't pick out the songs, by the way. Robert and Melanie, they pick out the songs, so they picked out the songs. Both songs actually talked about the mystery of God, which is pretty cool. So the angel said, there's no more delay. The mystery that's been talked about by the servants and by the prophets is now here. What is this mystery? Well, the mystery from the very beginning, after Adam and Eve sinned, was the mystery of this one that would come to pay for all the sins of the world. And so you'd look from way back here and you'd say, okay, this mystery from way back here going forward is this mystery of the Messiah who's coming, and Jesus Christ came. And so there's that mystery that's revealed in that sense, and then the mystery of his soon coming after that as well. So it's all about Jesus is the mystery. Then the voice, verse 8, then the voice that I had heard from heaven spoke to me again, saying, go, take the scroll. It says, angels holding the scroll. He says, take the scroll that is open in the hand of the angel who is standing on the sea and the land. So I went to the angel and told him to give me the little scroll. Now, big angel, little scroll. So he says, give me the little scroll. And he said to me, take and eat it. Have you ever eaten a scroll before? Have you ever eaten your homework paper before? Have you ever shoved a homework paper in your brother's mouth? Oh, sorry. Let's not go there. Okay, so he said to me, take this and eat it. It will make your stomach bitter, but in your mouth it will be sweet as honey. So we just had Halloween. How many of you ate so much candy that was sweet to your mouth that in the end your stomach's like, oh, I shouldn't have done that last 15 pieces of Reese's Cups, right? And I took the little scroll from the hand of the angel and ate it, and it was sweet as honey to my mouth. But when I had eaten it, my stomach was made bitter. And I was told, you must again prophesy about many peoples and nations and languages and kings. Here's the prelude to chapter 11. Then I was given a measuring rod, like a yardstick. It says it's like a staff, and I was told, rise and measure the temple of God and the altar and those who worship there. But do not measure the court outside the temple. Leave it out, for it is given over the mountains, and they will trample the holy city for 42 months. Now, here's a picture of the temple. Where's the temple? Jerusalem. Okay? So he's here to measure this out and measure only certain parts of it. Verse 3, and I will grant authority to my two witnesses, and they will prophesy for 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. Now that's 3.5 years in that calendar year that John is talking about. In the 42 months, it's the same concept there, where it's 3.5 years, that these two witnesses are going to be doing what they're called to do. And let me just kind of give you that. Go back to verse 1 and 2. Where will they be? These two witnesses are going to be in Jerusalem, around the temple. Their mission then, verse 3, is to prophesy. For how long? For 3.5 years. And they'll be clothed in sackcloth. So you know what they're going to wear? You know what their mission is? It's to prophesy. What is it to prophesy? It's to proclaim Jesus Christ, very simply. It's to give the gospel, to proclaim to the world that is there currently, and it's what we're called to do as well. Matthew 28, 18 to 20, he says, all authority has been given to me, and it's given to us then to go and to make disciples. That's our call. To be, in Acts chapter 1, verse 8, he says, and you will be my witnesses. Here's what that is. We are given the light from God to us. And we are called to be the light. And he says that in Matthew chapter 5. We are called to be the salt and the light. So the light is not something that we originate on our own. We are given the light to give to others. Okay? That's the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ, that Jesus Christ paid for our sins. God desires to have a relationship with us so much that he will spare no expense, even his own son, to pay for what is breaking that relationship, and allowing us, if we come to Jesus Christ, we can have a relationship with God. It's not about our religion. It's not about our good deeds. It's not about our style of clothing. It has everything to do with our relationship with Jesus Christ. So, that's what the two witnesses are coming to do. They're going to preach the gospel. They're prophesying about Jesus. They're going to preach the gospel to a world that is rejecting him. It says, these are the two olive trees and the two lampstands, which is interesting. I can't make this correlation fully, but it's interesting that out of an olive tree and the lampstand, the olive tree actually feeds the fuel for the lampstand. And that's just interesting kind of side note there. That stand before the Lord of the earth, if anyone were to harm them. Now, why would you harm somebody that's a witness of Jesus Christ? Have you ever seen someone get hurt, harmed because they're proclaiming who Jesus is? The answer is yes. Over in the Middle East, in our culture right now, there are countries that say if you proclaim Jesus Christ, if you talk about Jesus, you'll be put in jail, and some will actually put you to death. That was one of the main issues with Afghanistan and why we were concerned about troops and why they should be there, shouldn't be there, and that was some of the concerns because of the religious freedom that was not allowed, that was allowed for 20 years. That's not political, so don't think I'm going there. So when you look at where we are, have you ever talked about Jesus with somebody and they look at you and get mad at you? Well, of course. You feel like if you talk to someone about Jesus, you might get fired. You might lose a friend. And I won't ask for a raise of hands, but I know that in this room, probably many of us who have talked to others about Jesus and said, hey, he wants to be your Savior. That's the only way to have a relationship with God. And they say, no, my religion's going to get me there. I don't need Jesus. Or I'll deal with it when I get there, but I don't need this Jesus freak in my life. Just get him out. And I don't want you to ever talk to me about him again. And I know people that have gotten fired from jobs. They've lost dear friends. Their marriage is broken up. I know several people that have been through serious things in our culture. Now, for the two witnesses, they're proclaiming Jesus. And if anyone goes to harm them, what happens? Now, this is interesting. I don't suggest that we apply this because this is not of God for us, but it's of God for them. If anyone were to harm them, verse 5, fire pours from their mouth and consumes their foes. Could you imagine this? It's like a sci-fi movie now, right? Somebody's like, man, you make me mad. I don't want you talking about Jesus. And they go to speak and fire just pours out of the mouth and they're just consumed right there in front of everybody. That would kind of mess things up for everybody around. Like, what just happened to Uncle Joe, right? And you look at the different things that they can do then next. It says they have the power, verse 6, they have the power to shut off, to shut the sky. What is it to shut the sky? It's to make it so you can't rain. It says they shut the sky that no rain may fall during the days of the prophesying, and they have power over the waters to turn them into blood and to strike the earth and every kind of plague as often as they desire. What does this look like, by the way? Doesn't it look like Moses? Remember Moses? God calls Moses as a witness of God still working, and God saying, this is my nation Israel, and I love Israel, and I'm going to pull them out of captivity. And he calls Moses and says, Moses, I want you to go, be my witness, and to just tell them what I'm telling you. And so he walks into Pharaoh and says, hey, Pharaoh, you got to let my people go. They need to go worship God. And Pharaoh says, no, that's not going to happen. And he says, if you don't, plagues are going to happen. And you remember what happened. The water was made bitter. You had gnats and locusts and all kinds of things, and even darkness. The same things you see here are the same things that happened with Moses in Exodus. You follow chapter 2 all the way through. But you look at that and you'd say, wow, isn't that interesting? The correlation there. What did it take for Pharaoh, by the way, to finally let the people go? He temporarily let them go when his own son died, but it was only temporary. Then he chased after him, and he lost his life while chasing them. Fascinating. So the two witnesses, they're given this special power. It says in verse 7, and when they had finished their testimony, the beast that rises from the bottomless pit will make war on them and conquer them and kill them. What a weird story. Don't you find that weird? They're telling others about Jesus. They can burn people up with fire. They can do plagues. And then there's a beast that rises up from the bottomless pit, probably Satan, comes out and kills them. But it was at the moment that they were done their prophesying. They had finished their assignment, if you will, and the beast comes and kills them. Well, that's weird. What's weirder is what happens next. Verse 8. It says, and their dead bodies will lie in the street of the great city that symbolically is called Sodom and Egypt, where their Lord was crucified. For 3.5 days, some from the peoples and tribes and languages and nations will gaze at their dead bodies and refuse to let them be placed in a tomb. Could you imagine? These two witnesses, they're dead on the street, and everybody just walks by. They don't bury them. They leave them there for everybody to see. Verse 10, and those who dwell on the earth will rejoice over them and make merry and exchange presents, because these two prophets had been a torment to those who dwell on the earth. Why were they a torment? Because they were proclaiming something that they did not want to hear. How many people like to know that they're wrong? That's what's really going on. So what they do then is all the nations get together, all the countries get together, and they proclaim a universal day of the two witnesses being dead. It's party time. We're all coming here to celebrate. All the videos and everything's TV stops, and this is all you see. Celebration in the streets. The two witnesses are dead. Everybody's partying. It's crazy mayhem. It's worse than New York City, Times Square on New Year's. It's like absolutely bonkers with partying, excitement. See how nuts this is? Well, it gets better. Verse 12. Then they heard a loud voice from heaven saying to them, "Come up here." Or I missed verse 11, sorry. Wait, I'm reading it and I'm not getting it. Verse 11, but after the 3.5 days, there it is, it's verse 11. After 3.5 days, a breath of life from God entered them, and they stood up on their feet, and great fear fell on those who saw them. How cool is that? So the two witnesses are dead. 3.5 days later, people are walking by kicking them and everything, and all of a sudden the breath of God is breathed back into them, and they're like, oh, let's wake up from our nap, and they stand up in front of everybody. The record player that's going screeches to a halt. Everyone that's partying in the street just stop, and they're looking at these two that they were celebrating being dead. Wouldn't you at that moment, if you were in their shoes, fear for your life? But what's interesting is that God then calls them, a loud voice from heaven saying to them, "Come up here." They went up to heaven in a cloud, and their enemies watched them. And at that hour, there was a great earthquake. The 10th of the city fell. 7,000 people were killed in the earthquake, and the rest were terrified and gave glory to the God of heaven. So this crazy story that's unfolding, these two witnesses go and they tell everybody about Jesus. The people are refusing and they're wanting them dead. Finally, the beast comes out and kills them. They died. They're in the street for 3.5 days. Everybody's partying about that. And then they're raised from the dead and they go up to heaven. The end of the story is some people gave glory to God, but many died. Then and he says in verse 14, the second woe is past. Behold, the third woe is soon to come. Verse 15. Then the seventh angel blew his trumpet. There were loud voices in heaven saying, "The kingdom of the world has become the kingdom of our Lord and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever." The 24 elders who sit on their thrones before God fell on their faces and worshiped God, saying, "We give thanks to you, Lord God Almighty, who is and who was, for you have taken your great power and begun to reign. The nations raged, but your wrath came, and the time for the dead to be judged, and for the rewarding of your servants, the prophets and the saints, and those who fear your name, both small and great, and for destroying the destroyers of the earth." Then God's temple in heaven was opened. The ark of his covenant was seen within his temple. There were flashes of lightning, rumblings, peals of thunder, and earthquakes, and heavy hail. So we go from earth to heaven, rejecting God to praising and worshiping God. And here's what I'm focused on this morning. You see, the two witnesses have so many correlations to us as Christians. Not making an assumption that those that are here and those that are watching online, that you have taken that first step of faith by accepting Jesus Christ as your Savior. And you've then taken that next step of faith, where that first step of obedience really, where you've been baptized and you say, I am publicly declaring with others that I am following Jesus Christ. And as you've done that, from that point forward, you've begun to take steps to following God. But here's the reality. Just like the two witnesses that are following God, so in our lives, we go through all kinds of challenges and hardships as well. Where you say, I was once like this, but now I feel a lot more like this. So here's application points. 4. You ready? Number 1. What do we glean from this? Number 1, be present. Be present. I'm going to go back and look at these. Here's the two witnesses. They were called to be present. They were called to a specific place at a specific time. They were called to be the light in that world in a very, very dark time. They were given the light. They were called to be the light. They have that responsibility all the way through. That is what their assignment is. Do you realize that in the same way we are called to be the light in that same way? That is our mission. We're called to be present where we are with the light that's been given to us. And here's the truth of the matter. And I said this once already, we did not make this happen. I have this candle, brand new candle. This candle will not light itself. Agreed? That just doesn't happen. Neither does it happen in our lives spiritually. The light does not get lit by ourselves just thinking about God. It happens when God, who first loved us, introduces himself to us in understanding what his word is, understanding his redemption plan for us. And after that point of understanding, we come and we say, God, light my life. God, I surrender. I want to be a follower of you. I surrender to you. And so in that moment, it's that he takes then the lighter and he comes and lights us, right? And he says, okay, here, this is this new life. This is the new beginning that you have. And I'm afraid to light this because it's brand new and it's my wife's, and I'm not sure if I'll get in trouble, so I'm not going to light it. But this one's already lit, so you understand how this works. This is just up here for demonstration's sake. Okay. I'm kidding. But to be present. The two witnesses were present where they were. I asked you earlier already. Do you know somebody that's hurting? That feels hopeless? That's struggling in life? Almost everyone raised their hand, and those that didn't raise their hand, I think they were still thinking about it. Everybody has somebody. Everybody has somebody. Say it with me. Everybody has somebody. That means I have somebody. You have somebody. Maybe you feel like this, and maybe you raise your hand because that's you. I get it. Because we all have seasons like that. Everybody has somebody. Be present. That no matter where I'm at, I'm hanging out with this guy, and I come over and I say, hey, Glenn, how you doing? Or if I go over to Rob and Joyce or to Steve or anybody here, wherever we are, as we're present in life, we feel where they are. Because we might be the light that they need for that moment in that day. Here's what we often do. And you do it as well as I do, right? We walk around with this thing. Hey, Glenn, how you doing? Good to see you, buddy. It's going to be a good day, right? And isn't this how our life goes? We're not present. Saying, God might have called me to you today, right now. Be present. The two witnesses, they had to be present. It wasn't about waiting. Everybody has somebody. You're going to hear that a bit more from me in this season that we're going through. Everybody has somebody. Second application. This is so good. You ready for this? This is awesome. I love this at this point. Don't go alone. Don't go alone. Notice what God did here. He sent how many witnesses? 2. In Ecclesiastes, he says 2 are better than what? 1. They're stronger together. When he sent out the disciples, what did he do? He sent them out, and this is in Luke, he says he sent them out in 2s. Do you remember in Genesis chapter 2 when God formed Adam? Makes Adam, and all along in day number 1 he says good, day number 2 he said it's good, day number 3 he says it's good. He forms Adam and he says this thing he has never said before, and it's for our purpose to get our attention. He said it's not good that he is alone. So he makes a helper suitable, not a servant, but a helper, like God is our help in time of need, but that is the relationship, that we are strengthening each other. We are stronger together. Don't go alone. I find too often we try to go alone through life. Even a wick. Do you realize this wick is made not of one little strand, but it's made of a whole bunch woven together, a rope. That's what keeps it going. So we know that God is with us, and we're there for each other to go through life that is challenging, that brings us to our knees sometimes. I need 2 volunteers. 2 people help me out? Brian, Matt? All right, cool. You both were moving. Thank you. All right, awesome. So, Matt, why don't you stand over here on this corner here? Okay? Brian, you stand over here. Okay? This is good. Okay. Now, here's what normally happens. I'll try not to drop this candle. Here's what church often looks like. And we say this all the time. Church, we know we need connection. We need each other. Here's what church often looks like. Okay? We do the holy wave. Okay? Right? Or the holy fist bump. Or the, hey, how are you? Okay? This is what we do. And you guys demonstrate. It's, hey, how, no, you guys stay, we keep distance. Absolutely keep distance. And we wave and, hey, how you doing, right? And we come in on Sunday and what we do? Oh, hey, how you doing? Right? Hey, how was your week? Right? Great. Yes, great. Best week ever. Really? Oh, yeah, of course. How about the Eagles? Not like Eagles, Green Bay Packers. Yeah, and this is what we do every week. We are stuck in a system of high. Is that biblical? Is that 2 strands woven together? I read a story this week about a guy who lost his job. Instead of talking with anyone about it, even his wife, he literally went for several months getting up at the same time, putting on his work clothes, getting into the car at the same time he'd go to work, driving away, and sitting somewhere trying to apply for and find a job before his wife, his friends, or his people at church knew anything about it. Listen, we do it all the time. Hi, how are you? I'm having the worst week I've ever had. I had somebody say that to me the other day, not from church. Hey, how you doing? They said, I'm having the worst day of my life today. With a smile on her face. Great, glad to see you. Have a great day. Hope it gets better. Nervous laughter. I love the fact that this week, not to mention names, that there's a couple that's really going through it. That one was in the hospital a couple times, ended up with emergency surgery this week. And I love the fact that here's what that couple did. They reached out to their small group and said, can you pray for me? And the small group prayed and reached out. Guess when I found out? I found out when the small group leader reached out to me and said, hey, just to make sure you know, and included me on the communication, to which then I responded, I don't care when I find out that you're going through a hard time. My care is that as a church, we don't do the holy high and say socially distant, not for the sake of getting sick or whatever, but we stay socially distant because that's our repetition and pattern. All right, you guys, thanks. Appreciate it. Don't go alone. Don't go alone. If you're going alone right now in church, talk to somebody. Instead of leaving right away, hang out for a minute. Instead of coming in late, come in early. People show up now around 10 o'clock, like an hour before service, because they want to be together. Make time for each other. Don't go through life alone. Number three, and these are huge points, and I can spend a lot of time on them, but here's number 3. Pace yourself for the journey. Pace yourself for the journey. The 2 witnesses, how long were they going to be on earth, by the way? 3.5 years. That's a long time of abuse. Would you agree? How would you like for the world to hate you for 3.5 years? Like, you are on the front page of every newspaper every day for 3.5 years. We hate them. We want them to die. If anybody figures out a way to kill them, we'd appreciate it. We've dropped bombs. Didn't work. They burned them up before they got down. We've done everything. We've sent so-and-so. We want the Incredibles, or we want the Avengers, or we want somebody to get rid of them. Could you imagine? The whole world hating you. No acceptance. Constant rejection for 3.5 years. And here's the application point. Pace yourself. Pace yourself. So I came down this morning and I noticed that the candle was burning down the center, like the wick was burning down the center, and there's wax all around. So what do? I took a knife and I went and I pulled all the wax down into it so it melts evenly. That's right. Candle people? Did I do it right? You don't even know. Whatever. I did my research. I Googled it. I know what I'm doing now. Pace yourself. Listen, they performed acts of God, but only, listen to this, only as a result of being attacked. The only time that God showed up in their lives in that sense was when they were being attacked. It's fascinating. Pace yourself. The candle uses wax as fuel. In the same kind of way, we don't run ahead of the fuel that God gives to you. If you run ahead of the fuel God gives to you, you will burn out. If the wick burns down faster than the wax, faster than the fuel, it will burrow itself into the wax and it will extinguish itself with the fuel that's right there present for it to stay alive. Oftentimes we run ahead of God. We don't pace ourselves with God. We're running ahead because we see this need and that need and the other need. We got to do something. We're not waiting for God to instruct and fuel us for that. We just run ahead of God. We see that in the book of Joshua, where Joshua did that. He ran ahead of God instead of asking God, God, do you want me to do this? So pace yourself. Pace yourself. By the way, another side of this, don't store up fuel that's intended to be used today. You ever do that? God's given you the fuel to get through the day that you're getting through, and you try to store it up for tomorrow. Well, instead of being present with this person that I see has a need, I'm storing up that fuel where I see the need. I don't think I have enough energy to help in this moment, but God put you there, and God's going to give you that fuel, and He's giving you that fuel right now. Don't store it up for tomorrow when you can be a blessing right now. So pace yourself. As God is giving you the fuel, follow Him and don't run ahead and don't lag behind. Pace yourself with Him. That means that you have to have a constant relationship with God. That means that you have to be constantly fueled by God. That's why you're here, right? I know that's why you're here. You want to be fueled up. And you need to be self-fuelers as well, not just fueled here, but during the week you're getting fuel from God, saying, God, I need to get through this week. So you're praying and spending time in God's Word. Number 4, then we'll close. This is important. After 3.5 days, these witnesses are dead. After 3.5 days, God breathes breath back into them. Sometimes life blows out the flame or makes it so small that in order for a flame to go somewhere, the wax has got to get melted so that it becomes the fuel. Point number 4, allow God to relight the flame when Satan blows you out. See that? Sometimes we need to allow God and say, God, I'm going to need you here. Would you relight my flame? Because I'm discouraged. I'm hurting. I've prayed multiple times throughout my time with the Lord. Multiple times. Lord, would you give me courage and strength by the power of the Holy Spirit? Because if left up to me, I'm just going to put myself up on a shelf. And I'm sure you have prayed similar things or felt similarly. But it's constantly going back and saying, God, I'm toast. I'm beat down. Light me up and fuel me. During the darkest season of history, God was working revival plans. As I study revival, here's one of the fascinating little facts. Prior to every revival, it's 2 things: prayer and darkness. Almost a deep hatred for God and people that were passionate about God. And down here, God worked revival. In our day, in this season, my prayer is that we see revival. That we see God working in a way that we never anticipated God to work. It will happen when everybody that knows somebody prays for them, cares for them, is present in their life, and is fueled by God and allows for that fuel to be a blessing to others. It won't happen if we just sit back and we sit on a shelf and let the wax get cold and just become an ornament. It's not what God's called us to. God called for us to be His witnesses. I asked Rob and Melanie to come back up and lead us in that song, portion of the song that you sang earlier. Man, what a great song. Be still, my soul. Do you need that? Maybe you don't, but I'll bet there's someone in your life that does. Let me pray for you. And let's pray together and then we'll sing. Lord God, thank you so much that you give us fuel for every day. Lord, just even as Jesus instructs to pray, give us this day our daily bread. Give us this day our daily fuel, our daily spiritual fuel, our daily emotional fuel, our daily fuel to get us through today. And Lord, I'm praying for some that I'm sure are here or listening to my voice that just feel like the wax is cold, the fire is out, and they just feel like they need to sit on the shelf. Maybe they're down and it's been 3.5 days and they're just not sure which side's up. I get it. Lord, I feel that. Lord, you do too. So God, give them strength. Give them encouragement in this moment. May your Holy Spirit work mightily in their hearts right now. And may we as a church not just sit back and observe, but may we as a church reach out to each other and care for each other, to be present in their life. Lord, whether it's the people here in this building or people in our neighborhood or people that we haven't seen in a while or people at work, no matter where we are, God, you've called us to be witnesses. Lord, help us to be present for that. And we give you praise through Jesus, I pray.